Hello again. Today we will demonstrate the process. We'll give an example of the essay writing process, taking this question here as the point of departure. It gives rise to a debate, which can be argued pro or con. Since the point of the exercise is to produce an argumentative or persuasive essay, we will assume one of these two positions, pro or con, and we will follow this outline here, points 1, 2, 3, and 4, and which are designed in the following way. Point 1, parts A and B, refer to the topic statement, and the topic statement, I wouldn't call it a sentence actually, because there may be more than one sentence involved. The topic statement simply says what the content area of your text, in which your text will be situated. And point B, 1B, the topic sentence this time is about your specific position or recommendation. In this case, we've introduced a debate topic, and we're going to write an example of the pro position. And of course, remember to avoid unprofessional, non-academic, semi-formal sounding uses of self-reference, which can include reference to a supposed interlocutor. You won't say you, your, and yours if you can possibly avoid it. So 1A and B, statement of your topic and of your position within that topic, in this case, pro or con. And then 2, we get into the support. For strategical reasons, I have suggested ordering these 3 types of support in this way, but depending on the strategy or the needs and the situation, the context of the writer, any order may be appropriate. I have ordered them this way as a sort of a default, a conventional default, because we know that the first thing that people hear is what impresses them the most, and the last thing they hear is what they remember best. And there should be a rock solid bridge between the two. So I have often followed this procedure here, but it's by no means obligatory, and depending on the context of your work, it might not be appropriate. There might be another ordering that's appropriate. However, when I'm correcting your essays, I will look for each of these. I'm not suggesting that when you write your essay, you label everything in this way. I'm still considering whether or not I should allow that. It's not necessary. It should not be necessary. You'll have this outline, this very page probably, next to you while you're writing, so it should not be necessary. But let's pretend that that is what we're doing. Everything is labeled. Everything's labeled. Point 3, A and B. After you've supported your own position, you have to quote or mention the most serious, the most important objection to your position that there may be. And that may be, of course, of any type. It may be something extremely emotional. It may involve facts which you will denounce as erroneous or quoted inappropriately. It could be any kind of appeal. And of course, you must provide any appropriate answer that there is to that objection. For the conclusion, I'm asking you to include in the conclusion these two kinds of sentences. There should be a non-real conditional sentence, and there should be a real one. In either order, this order is relevant. Now let's go straight to an example from a student. Here's an example submitted by a very clever, very hardworking and serious and highly organized student who has permitted me to quote her work here. Actually, she is not, but I'm assuming that permission. I've taken her work apart and I've put the parts underneath each of these labels, which we just saw a moment ago. So, topic sentence or statement starting with the area of the topic. Which topic area or content area is the text going to be in? What does it concern? So it starts with this very general statement that the relationship between food consumption patterns and the condition of planet Earth is well established. Now you'll notice that this this part of the topic statement is a very general statement, and it makes you think of ethical appeal. That's normal because it's a general topic area. It's not an exercise in logic, nor is it an exercise in the expression of emotions. So that's a tendency. The beginning, the first part, the generic part of the topic statement will be something more or less like ethical appeal, something more like ethos. And the second part, of course, which is your specific position, it has to be pro or con. Well, this student has chosen to take the pro position, meaning supporting the statement which we saw a moment ago. Everybody, what was it now? What was it? Let's go shooting back up to the top. What was it? Oh, it is of the utmost urgence, that everyone convert to strict vegetarianism, argue pro-con. Now she chose to support that position. So in her topic sentence, she has said that we're going to talk about the relationship between what we eat and the condition of the planet. And I'm going to propose that everybody needs to urgently consider vegetarianism and convert to it as soon as possible. All right, she's chosen this position, pro. So let's shoot back down to the page that we were working on. Here we go. So she starts by saying, to specify her position or recommendation, she starts by saying, it can be argued that the world population needs to or should hurry up and convert to strict vegetarianism to protect the planet, to protect planet Earth and future generations. Notice that to protect the planet, really what that means is in order to protect the planet. This is an instance of what we call the two of purpose. She had some hesitation here between these two modals. Do they need to do this? Do we all need to do this? Or should we do this? Well, should refers to internal sense of duty. Must refers to external compulsion to perform one's duty. So, well, you have a choice here. If you think that it's enough that people realize that they should do this, well, fine. You may be of the opinion that people do not typically do things simply because they know that they should do them. But that's another point. So you decide here. The world population must, the world population needs to, the world population had better or should. You're going to have to decide. Now up here, originally this writer started with, "It is clear that," all these things. I criticized that slightly because it sounds like a very self-confident thing to say before you have even proposed your arguments, before you've even given support to your system, to your position. So, I mean, it's not wrong, but I would probably go for something like this or like this. Too bad it takes so many words, though. That's part of the problem, eh? Point two. Well, point two is A, B, and C, the three types of supporting evidence. And for the illustration, this writer has agreed to follow my pattern, which was to put the pathetic appeal first. Go first for pathos. Well, you have different ways you can start. What she's done is she's talked about what is typically true in the current period today, nowadays, people these days, or everyone is. People are, or everyone is, more concerned. That's what she said, and then she left it at that. More concerned about what they eat. That was her original sentence. My criticism of that is that when you say everyone is more concerned about XYZ, I'm waiting for the other term of the comparison. Everyone is more concerned than before, and before when or before what? I suggest this. Nowadays, people are becoming more and more concerned. And what are they becoming more and more concerned about? About what they eat. And why is that? They're more and more concerned about what they eat because they are aware of what is involved in the food transformation process. Well, actually, this part here was my suggestion. I put that there because it was the opportunity for me to talk about compounding. Now, you see, we have processes and all kinds of processes. So processes are a category. And when you say what kind of thing inside that category, well, that's when you create a compound. So actually, this is the first member of the compound, but it is itself a compound. So let's look at this compound. Transformation. There are all kinds of transformations. What kind? What kind? Which one exactly do you mean? Well, she's referring to food transformation. Transformation of food. What kind of transformation? And you see, over here we have the same thing. The same operation repeats and concatenates. One's inside the other. So you have different kinds of processes. You have transformation processes. Transformation of what? What kind of transformation? Food transformation processes. Notice that when we have a compound that contains a compound, as is the case here, the strong accent only goes here. Food transformation processes. Now, if you were to say, well, this here is a compound, so it has to be up and then down, then all of this here is the first member of this compound. Well, logically, you would think that this has to be lower. You would expect to hear something like food transformation processes, but that is something we don't do. We never do that. We never do that. So what happens here is that the accent, strong accent is here, and everything here. The rest of this is on the same level. Interesting. Now, in a text, you might think that that's not so important, but in fact, we're always, well, most of us, are usually vocalizing in our heads when we're writing and when we're thinking about things. And that's not bad. There's a reason for that. The reason is that the meaning and the structure and the sound are very, very tightly bound with each other. And so naturally, when we're thinking about the meaning of food plus transformation plus process, we are creating the compound within the compound, which is associated strictly with the accent. In our English, our Anglo brains. Let's look at some more. Well, this is the rest of the student's pathetic appeal to pathos. So she says, currently, nowadays, the meat industry is killing poor, defenseless animals who or that do not deserve to die and is polluting the air. Well, there are a few small details here that I'm correcting. Now, she had this. The meat industry is polluted the air. Well, that's confusing one of the participles with the other type. This happens. This happens. Your brain is slowly differentiating the past participle or the past passive participle from the present, so-called present active participle. And so sometimes students mix them up. Just watch this. This conjugation exists, and it's an active conjugation. The meat industry is doing this. It's polluting the air. It is the air that or which the world population, where's the rest of it? The world population is breathing. But there's something I want to talk to you about first. Okay, first, why who or that? Why poor versus defenseless? Well, this student originally wrote, the meat industry is killing poor animals. Now, that's very emotional sounding. It's not wrong, and it is an appeal to pathos, so that could be defended. However, if it is in a text which is more or less a type of journalism, an instance of journalism, or journalistic commentary, or anything semi-formal or academic or professional, you might not want to put a word which is as personal as that. This is just my opinion. However, it would be quite normal in the academic or semi-academic text to refer to the destruction, the killing, the slaughtering of defenseless animals. I would say here. Slaughtering. Now, slaughtering is much stronger than killing. You can look these words up and you'll see why I say so, why I think so. And poor is also, in a way, I might say that it's stronger than defenseless. But if you have slaughtering defenseless animals, then it's very, very clear. The innocence of the animals who are being, well, practically murdered, if you like. Well, even if you don't like it, that is, I think, what it sounds like. Notice that she didn't really hesitate. She put who. Animals who. Okay? They are killing, slaughtering defenseless animals who do not deserve to die. Well, the point is that when we're choosing between who, that, and perhaps which, in English, what you have to bear in mind is that who is generally associated with conscious entities, cognizant entities, human beings, and which is usually associated with things, and it's also frequently associated with the idea of which one, selection. The book which I was reading last night is is gone somewhere. Which book are you looking for? You know, the one which I was reading last night. It's not always necessary to emphasize selection in that way. In fact, many speakers do not. They will use THAT for non-human, non-sentient beings. Now, if you use who when you're talking about defenseless animals, that's possible, but remember that you're personifying the animals. When you do this, you are explicitly stating your position that the animals are, well, to you are like people, to put it simply. That might be a bit strong, depending on the text that you're writing. So you decide. Defenseless animals, who, that, or which do not deserve to die. And is polluting the air. Is polluting the air, careful, there's another adjective clause here. Just a minute, where is it? Let me grab this part back here, okay? Right. The air is polluting the air that the world population, I'm putting it back together again here. There, that was more or less the original sentence. Currently, the meat industry is slaughtering, killing poor defenseless animals, who, that which, do not deserve to die, and is polluting the air the world population is breathing. Now, here's what I want you to notice. This here, all of this here, is an adjective clause modifying the air. And notice that this here can fall away. Okay, so the meat industry is polluting the air the world population is breathing. Okay, why is it that you can drop that or which? Why don't you have to say the meat industry is polluting the air that the world population is breathing? Well, look at this. This part of the adjective clause, you see it's a clause. Here's a subject, world population. Here's the verb, it's breathing. And what is understood is that they're breathing the air. In other words, the understood object is the air. But of course we don't have that. It's gone, right? And instead of being down there, sorry, it's up here. Now, in that case, when it's a direct object, when it is when the missing words in the adjective clause are here, and those missing words come from the object position, in that case, and in only that case, it's possible to drop this completely. So let me just make sure I found book I was reading. Well, I know some Arabic speaking students, and in their language, when you build a sentence like this, well, they say something like, I found the book that I was reading it. And in fact, English speaking children, when they're just starting to speak, often do this. Many languages do this. In English, this disappears. It's sort of understood to be there. It's the object of reading. I was reading what? I was reading the book. Okay, so got it? All this here is the noun and the adjective clause that modifies it. And because this noun corresponds to the direct object of reading, which is removed, in that case only, in English, the THAT can be dropped. I have another way of signaling that. In linguistics, what we do, language learning, not just theoretical linguistics, any language learning, we use the premises like this. And we use the premises to mean that the material inside the premises is optional. So I found the book I was reading. The meat industry is polluting the air that we breathe. The meat industry is polluting the air we breathe. You see? All right. Now let's talk about the world population just for a minute. That is another issue. What the student had written was, I believe, something like this. What the writer had was the population of the world. Well, that's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But in different contexts, for different reasons, which I can't get into in detail today, sometimes we prefer to put the corresponding compound noun. So this compound noun, is it a compound? That's the question. Is it a compound? We have this, and we might prefer this. We think, though, is that compounding? Well, how do I pronounce it? I pronounce the world population. The meat industry is polluting the atmosphere that the world population, the population of the world, needs to breathe. Hey, you know something? I think that is not a compound. It's something very close, dangerously close. So close that you can get confused, and so close that sometimes there is variation. But this is the world population. It's not the world population. We won't say that the meat industry is poisoning the air that the world population needs to. No, we would not say that. The meat industry is poisoning the air that the world population needs to. Yes, the world population, or even the world's population. In this case, the mark of possession is optional. But let's talk about that some more. Why isn't it the world population? Well, let me give you an illustration. What is the difference between I'm not going to pronounce it. And what is the difference between these two? None in writing, unless, of course, you cheat a little bit and show the pronunciation. So how about, why don't we do that? Aha. The ladies' room versus the ladies' room. Well, this is the room that belongs to the ladies. In other words, this room is part of the ladies' little world. It's something that belongs to them. It's something that's theirs. It doesn't define them. but you could say that there's a part-whole relationship. This room is part of the ladies' environment, part of their house, part of where they live, part of their universe, if you like. The ladies' room, now that's a compound. That's a compound. The ladies' room is a kind of room. And the category of room is being specified with the first member of the compound. That's how compounds work. Compounds answer the question, what kind, which one, or what kind. So when you say the world's population, you're not saying really what kind of population. No, not really. You're talking about the population as one of the characteristics, or one of the things that belong to the world. It's a part-whole relationship. This here is not a part-whole relationship. This is like a definitory relationship. So that's how this word world or worlds is treated as an adjective or a modifier of population. Part-whole relationship. I can give you another example that's probably, well, I hope this one will convince you. Do we say, okay, which species is becoming extinct, going into extinction in the Quebec area? Well, bears. Bears are are becoming extinct. So there's a population. That's a very generic word. Now within that category, that very general category, what can we say to make the category more specific? In other words, what do we do to answer the question, which population? What kind of population? Take 3 seconds and guess how to pronounce this. That's the bear population. The bear population. Now, meat industry. What kind? The meat industry. Industry is a category. It's a category of things or phenomena. And you want to narrow that category so that we know what kind of industry we're talking about. We're talking about the meat industry. Yeah, I need another one. One more. Take a few seconds to guess how to pronounce this. How would you pronounce this? Well, if you recognize the trap, you should already know. If we're talking about a teacher of English, we mean a kind of teacher. So we're asking, what kind of teacher? How do we narrow the category down? That's typically the sort of thing that a compound noun will do. So that will be the English teacher. Now, if you're talking about part-whole relationship, which is closer to the qualifying relationship, the English teacher, you mean the teacher who is a person among the vast group of other people who are English. So equality is being attributed to the teacher, so the teacher is recognized as a member of all the people who have that quality. So that's a part-whole relationship of the kind. The teacher who is English, as opposed to the teacher of English. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm thinking about this here. Mhm. Now, as you may know, um, there still are a lot of people in Louisiana who consider themselves French or who are French and came to Louisiana because they thought it would be great to discover the descendants of their own ancestors. It was a popular thing to do back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. So there was a segment of the population of New Orleans which was French. So take a few seconds and tell me, how would you pronounce this? As a compound or as a part to whole relationship? In other words, in this construction here, is this like an adjective, a modifier? Or rather, would you say that this is like a category and this here narrows down the category? Well, for reasons that I'll let you figure out on your own, we pronounce this as the French population in or of New Orleans. Not the French population of New Orleans. Well, if there's contrast, you could say the French population. Okay, so in New Orleans, there's a Spanish population and there's a French population. We would put the accent there for contrast. But if there's no contrast, no context, no issue of contrast, we would pronounce this as the French population. The French population of New Orleans has settled in Louisiana to discover to discover its roots. There's no contrast, not French population with any other population. So the French population, you think about that. Let's keep looking at the rest of this student's text. 2B is supporting evidence of the ethos type, ethical appeal. All right, so here's how she starts. Studies have shown, good, ethical appeal. You're referring to something that will give your own position more credibility. To do that, you refer to people or organizations or studies or vast bodies of popular knowledge which people already respect. And some of that respectability will trickle down to you. And you will gain in credibility because you're appealing to ethos. All right, so studies have shown that the various actors or the various stages of the meat industry are using or taking up, what are they using or taking up? They're more land and water. Now this part here, I couldn't understand. I'm going to leave that without comment for the moment. I didn't really get it. But studies have shown that the various actors of the meat industry, the various stages of the meat industry, are using or use, are taking up or take up more land and water than someone else. Well, let's talk about this briefly. There's a problem here. There's a bit of a conflict between generic and specific, current period, and general present. Now, if you say uses, uses up, requires, takes up more land and water than, I don't know, someone else, okay? Never mind that for the moment. You're speaking generically. The meat industry, notice the use of the singular and the use of the definite article. Now, this is possible when you're referring to a social phenomenon or an invention. The television became popular in the 50s. The small town grocery is disappearing from the countryside. Now, that use of the refers to a category. Normally, we don't do that in English, but for this type of thing, we do. Social phenomenon. For example, the working student is more and more common in today's world, the working student. It's not to say which working student, it's not specific, but we can use the, even when we're not being specific and we're talking about a category. Okay, so that's fine. So this is a kind of generic, and this is compatible with this present. Uses up, requires, takes up lots of land and water. Now, the writer had are using and are taking up. That's not impossible, but that's shifting the emphasis to what is happening right now. So you could say the meat industry or the various actors of the meat industry are doing this. We might prefer that because we're talking about the crisis nowadays. It's very present. It's up to you. This use of the generic can sound more scientific. It can sound somewhat more objective. This use of the continuous or the present continuous or the present progressive can imply things about, can make implications about what's happening right now. And you might have to reinforce that. You just be aware that the focus is different. Focus on what is happening in the current situation, the situation in the current period, as opposed to what happens generally across the board. You decide what the emphasis should be. How about 2C? The last item of appeal, the last type of supporting evidence that we propose is supposed to be logos, meaning not just logic, but it means reasonableness. It's logical, of course, but the main point is that your credibility is enhanced by something that you'll say or write which satisfies the reason. It does not appear illogical. So it has been observed over and over by researchers, that sounds to me like ethical appeal. Researchers have observed that also sounds like ethical appeal, that meat processing creates a lot of pollution and it is harmful to the health of the population, the human population. Let's take this down here and look at it. Well, my criticism of this this support, this supporting argument, is that it sounds to me like another appeal to ethos. I don't see logical appeal here in the sense that there's no syllogism. There's nothing like this is true and that is true. Therefore, here's the conclusion. I don't see that. I would expect something like, okay, we have observed that meat processing creates a lot of pollution and is harmful to the health of the human population. Let's say that this is the first step in the syllogism. Okay, what would the second step be? Okay, the planet is finite in space and resources. Okay, that's kind of obvious. The planet is not infinitely big. Okay, it's not infinitely big. Resources. Okay, so let's say that this here is the first step in the syllogism. This here is the second step in the syllogism. And so I would expect the conclusion to come next. And the conclusion could be something like this obviously, logically, logically cannot go on forever. There you go. Okay, so therefore, and the meat industry must change, if not indeed disappear altogether. There. Okay, now that would be, I think that would be an acceptable example of logical appeal. Notice that in the first steps of the syllogism, the logical statement, you have one statement which appears to be, I would say, of the ethical type, seeming to appeal to ethos, and the second one is also of that type. One is somewhat more general than the other. This one is very general, and this one's a little bit more specific. And the conclusion, I think, is reasonable. If you produce this syllogism, especially after all those other things that you've said in the appeal to ethos and the appeal to pathos, it would seem, I would think that this statement would reinforce your credibility and practically close your case. And how do we close our case? Well, we can't. We cannot yet. We have to quote, it is our duty, it's our intellectual duty, to refer to the more serious objections to our position which may exist. Now here, we have in fact a very serious objection, phrased in two different ways. It has been claimed that the meat industry is having a good influence on the Canadian economy. I found that kind of puzzling. To have a good influence, it's like, it makes me think that the Canadian economy is like a kindergarten class, and the meat industry is having a good influence on the children. I'm not saying, sorry, I don't mean to make fun of anybody, but that was the connotation that came up, that sort of came to mind. Also, notice that there's no transition. There has to be some kind of transition between what came before and this, because this is, here we are in the cons. You're quoting the cons. Your position is pro, but you have to quote the cons and you have to answer one of their arguments. So I might do this. On the other hand, it has been pointed out that the meat industry is essential to the economy. Okay. And then you have to answer that. That's 3A, quote the objection. 3B, you're supposed to come up with an answer. Well, let's look at your answer. Answer is something like this. However, meat processing inevitably involves or entails tremendous waste, since meat has to be eaten fresh. I put this in here since. The writer had originally put due to the fact. Now, since and due to the fact mean more than because. Due to the fact introduces the cause, okay. Since also introduces the cause. I prefer since because it's just one word, and because it has the connotation of explaining. It's not just saying this happened because, X happened because of Y. It's saying something like, X happened, and here's how you can understand why it happened. Here's the explanation of how it happened. Here's the background of how it happened. Now, the fact that meat has to be eaten fresh is more or less the cause of all this waste, but it's not like a deliberate cause. It's a cause that you refer to, it's an explanatory sort of cause. I'm sorry, that's not the best way to put it, but let's say it's the contextual background, it's a contextual set of causes. Now, meat has to be eaten fresh, so that is the basis of all kinds of expensive, messy problems in the meat processing plant and the meat industry in general. I put inevitably. So that means there's no way to avoid this. It inevitably involves or entails waste, tremendous waste. And here's the main reason for that. So, okay, on the one hand, the meat industry is essential to the economy. But look here, that's no excuse because meat processing is extremely dirty. Well, that's one possible answer. When I spoke with this writer, she agreed that there are other ways that you could answer this objection, and the other students also had their answers. I can mention just one for now. Well, the meat industry is essential to the economy, and if you're asking me, what will we do if we throw out the meat industry or convert it? Well, that's exactly my answer. In fact, we will convert it rather than simply throw it out. We'll convert it. All of those people will transfer their expertise to other activities in the agricultural sector. They just won't be doing meat anymore. Now, how do we conclude? How do we conclude? Well, you write a few lines, and somewhere in those lines, you must have, I'm requiring that you do this, you must have a non-real conditional sentence, and you must also have a real conditional sentence. So the conclusion is not simply, or need not simply be composed of these two types of sentences. It'll probably be a bit more than that. But for the moment, let's just look at the examples created by this writer. Yeah, let me push this down so we can look at it all on one screen. Okay. All right, so she says, if people become better informed and care enough about the benefits of vegetarianism, our planet will be cleaner and purer. All right. Okay, if people become, simple present, our planet will. Okay, so this obviously is an example of the real conditional. The real conditional. So if people become better informed, this means that there's the possibility, and we are anticipating this possibility, that people will become better informed and that they will care. Now, the writer originally put the good effect of the vegetarianism. The good effect of the vegetarianism. All right, let's start here. First of all, in the convention, the notational convention, if you put a form or a word, for example, this one here, in parentheses, and you put the asterisk inside, that means this word cannot go there. You cannot say the benefit or the good effect of the vegetarianism. You cannot do that, and I'll explain that in a second. Also, the good effect, the good effect of, well, I don't know if that's a mistake or a very, very strange sounding expression. The good effect, we won't say the good effect. We'll prefer, let's say, the beneficial or the positive effects, not effect, of vegetarianism. I prefer simply to say the benefits or the health benefits of vegetarianism. Notice this, health benefits. Health benefits. What kind of benefits? Health benefits. Again, this is a nominal compound used to narrow down a category of phenomenon. The category of phenomenon is vast, it's benefits. Okay, so what kind of benefits? What kind? That's when we use the compound noun, health benefits. Well, what's wrong with the vegetarianism? Well, the vegetarianism, let's take it down here and look at it. The vegetarianism is fun for everyone. Just take that as an example sentence, okay? That's not possible. We can't say the vegetarianism is fun for everyone. We know that when we say vegetarianism, in the context of this sentence, they were talking about the uncountable, eternally singular thing, like love and electricity. We don't say the electricities. We don't say the electricity unless we mean the electrical supply. That's when we can say the electricity. Otherwise, no. If you were to say the electricity was discovered hundreds of years ago by the Greeks, thousands actually, we can't do that. The usually in English means an entity or a phenomenon that has already been identified in the conversation. I'm talking to you and I say the because I am assuming that you know which one I mean, exactly which one or exactly which kind I mean. So if I were to say, I was reading the book, and just stop right there, the person listening to you will automatically wonder, you're reading the book? Well, which book was that? That's the way it works in English. And it works that way for vegetarianism. You don't say the vegetarianism. You say vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is fun. Now, careful. If vegetarianism somehow is interpreted as a specific instance, une occurrence, comme on dit, a specific instance of the thing that we're talking about, the general phenomenon, then we have the reverse. Notice here the asterisk is inside the parentheses, and here the asterisk is outside. When you just have the parentheses like this, it means optional. If you put the asterisk next to the parentheses, it means this is not optional. You cannot say veganism that she practiced was too severe. You mean the veganism, which veganism? The one that she practiced, the version that she practiced. The vegetarianism, sorry, not veganism, the vegetarianism that she practiced was too severe. And remember, this here is in parentheses, there are no asterisks. That means that it's optional. So the vegetarianism she practiced, the vegetarianism that she practiced. And one way of illustrating this is that when we say the vegetarianism that she practiced, what we really mean is the form of vegetarianism. This is optional. It can drop. Nothing changes if you drop it. So the form of vegetarianism that she practiced was too severe. This is optional. This is optional. But this is not optional. The, which one? You're supposed to know which one I'm meaning. Now, okay, so that's a real conditional. What's this one? If the meat industry were using animals that are already dead to product their products, it would have more people who accept. I'm not 100% certain what this is, but let's say produce instead of product their product. Produce their products. Again, this sounds very repetitive or redundant or pleonastic. That's okay. Never mind that. If the meat industry were using animals, notice it's were and not was. This here is dialect. In standard English, there's one exception for this form, for this past form used in the conditional. For the verb to be, for the non-real conditional, we don't say was, we always say were. Okay. I wouldn't do that if I were you. He wouldn't do that if he was here, if he were here. No. Third person is not was, it's going to be were. That's the only exception. In all of the conditional forms, that's the only exception that you have to learn. So if the meat industry were using animals that are already dead to produce their products, okay, that's a strange example. It's a very surprising example. It would have, not sure what she meant by that. I'm not sure what she meant by that, but perhaps she meant there would be. Now, this is interesting. You know that long ago, Jamaica was French. The people there spoke French. Then the French colonizers were replaced by British ones, and the French language was replaced by English. And in Jamaica, they say this, it would have, instead of there would be. It would have is some kind of transposition from French of il y aurait, and it has survived in Jamaican English. I've had students here who've occasionally done this. Maybe that's what this writer intended, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not a telepath. However, you can do this in a different way, this sentence. You could say, instead of having an empty subject like it or there, okay? You could say more people. More people would or might or even could accept. Accept what? Accept what? I don't know. Oh, I see. She didn't finish that sentence. Who would or might or could accept let's say accept a conversion to vegetarianism, or just accept vegetarianism. So you see, in the non-real conditional, these are your choices. These are your only choices. In the real conditional, you can put any modal that you want to, including might and could. Any one that you want to, except for would. That's the only one that doesn't go in the real conditional. Let's look at it up here. If people become better informed and care enough about the benefits or the health benefits of vegetarianism, our planet will, what were the other ones? May, might, can, could, shall, should, but not would. Would is the only one that can't go with the real conditional. Be cleaner and purer. Let's set it out here so you can see it. Our planet will, may, might, can, could, shall, should, but not would, be cleaner and purer. Let's go down to the other one. If the meat industry were using animals that were already dead to produce their products, okay, that's interesting. More people would, might, could, but of course not may, not shall, etc., except vegetarianism. All right, let's finish this off. I don't know how this works. If people were using animals that are already dead, yeah, that's true. People would be happy. They would be happy to switch to vegetarianism. However, well, when you do eat meat, you are eating a dead animal. So I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, that doesn't discourage people. Do you think more people would be happy about eating meat if the animal were alive? Oh, come on. Strange. All right, let me see. How do we finish this? Even if this process took as long as 5 years, it still could work. Well, it still could work. See this? Here's the past. You see this? Here's one of those three possible modals for the non-real conditional. So this here is a a non-real conditional statement. Even if. Now, what's the difference between even if and if? If this process took as long as 5 years, it could still work. Even if this process took 5 years, even if that means this word even adds the idea of contrast. In this case, it's contrast. It emphasizes the contrast between what is true and what you might believe to be true. So you might never expect this to work if it takes 5 years. But she's saying, even if it takes as long as 5 years, it will still work. Even if this process took this long, it still could work. You decide whether you want to say that in the real or the non-real conditional. It depends entirely on what you want to emphasize. If we didn't eat so much meat, the planet would not be in this situation. I think that speaks for itself.